This is the Story Slot. In each episode, we bring you traditional stories with light dramatisation. This story is Briar Rose, originally published around 1812 by the Brothers Grimm. The Brothers Grimm, Jacob and Wilhelm, were born in Germany in the 1780s. They were learned academics, best known for collecting and publishing European folk stories. Their collected stories are known by different names throughout the world and have dropped in and out of popularity over the years. These works are perhaps best recognised through the many adaptations rather than in their first published form. Among the more famous of these may be Walt Disney's interpretations of Grimm's fairy tales, such as Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Beauty and the Beast, and even Disney's very first full-length feature, Snow White. And now, without further ado, we bring you the story of Briar Rose.
Once upon a time, there was a king and queen. Their kingdom was far away, in a place where fairies still lived in those days. The king and queen had plenty of money, and plenty of clothes to wear, and plenty of good things to eat and drink, and a coach to ride out in every day. They had been married for many years, but they had no children, and this made them very sad. One day, the queen was walking by the river, and she saw a fish lying on the bank, gasping for breath. She took pity on the poor little fish and threw it back into the water. Before it swam away, it lifted its head out of the water.
I know what your wish is, and in return for your kindness, it shall come true. You will soon have a daughter.
What the little fish had foretold soon came to pass. The queen had a little girl, and they called her Briar Rose. She was so beautiful that the king could not stop looking at her. He decided to hold a great party so that everybody could come to celebrate with them. His kinsmen and nobles and friends and neighbours were all invited.
I would like the fairies to come to our party too. They are so kind and good.
There were 13 fairies in the kingdom, but the king and queen only had 12 dishes for them to eat out of, so they were forced to leave one out. So 12 fairies came, each with a high red cap on her head, and red shoes with high heels on her feet, and a long white wand in her hand. After the feast was over, they gathered round in a circle and gave all their best gifts to the little princess. One gave her goodness, another beauty, another riches, and so on until she had all that was good in the world. Just as 11 of them had done blessing her, there was a great noise outside, and word was brought that the 13th fairy had come. She wore a black cap on her head, and black shoes on her feet, and a broomstick in her hand. Up she came into the dining hall. She was very angry at not being invited to the party.
The king's daughter shall be wounded by a spinning wheel in her 15th year and fall down dead.
The 12th of the friendly fairies, who had not yet bestowed her gift, came forward.
I cannot undo this evil spell, but I can soften its mischief. When wounded by the spinning wheel, she shall not die. She shall only fall asleep for 100 years.
The king still hoped to save his dear child altogether from the threatened evil. So he ordered that all the spinning wheels in the kingdom be brought to the palace and burnt. In the meantime, all the gifts of the first 11 fairies were fulfilled. She was so beautiful, well behaved, good and wise that everyone who knew her loved her. Now, it just happened that on the very day she turned 15, the king and queen were not at home. So she roamed the palace by herself, looking around in all the rooms, until at last she came to a narrow staircase that led up to an old tower. In the door there was a golden key, and when she turned it, the door sprang open. There sat an old lady, busily spinning away.
What are you doing there?
I'm spinning.
How prettily that little thing turns around.
And she took the spindle and began to try and spin. But no sooner had she touched it than the bad fairy's prophecy came true. The spindle wounded her, and she fell down lifeless on the ground. She wasn't dead, for the 12th fairy's magic had kept her safe. She was only sleeping, very deeply. The king and queen came home, and they and all their court fell asleep too. The horses slept in the stables, the dogs in the palace, the pigeons on the roof, and even the flies slept on the walls. Even the fire in the hearth stopped burning and went to sleep. The jester stopped playing, and the spit stopped turning. The cook and the kitchen boy fell down asleep too. The butler, who was slyly tasting the ale, fell asleep with the jug at his lips. And so everything stood still and slept soundly. A large, thick hedge of thorns soon grew around the palace, and every year it grew higher and thicker, until at last the palace was surrounded and hidden completely. The news went all over the land of the beautiful sleeping Briar Rose. From time to time, kings' sons came and tried to break through the thicket and into the palace, but none could ever manage it. After many, many years, another king's son came into the kingdom. An old man told him of the thicket of thorns, and how a beautiful palace stood behind it, and a wonderful princess, called Briar Rose, lay in there asleep. He told, too, how many, many princes had come, and that none of them had ever managed to get through the fearsome hedge of thorns.
That shan't put me off. I will go and see this Briar Rose.
The old man tried to put him off, but he was determined to go. It just so happened that that day was the last day of the 100 years. And as the prince came to the thicket, he saw nothing but beautiful flowering shrubs. He went through with ease, and they shut behind him, as thick as ever. At last he came into the palace and saw the court and the dogs asleep. Everything was just as still as ever. He went on through the palace until at last he came to the old tower. He opened the door and saw Briar Rose there, fast asleep on a couch by the window. She looked so beautiful, he could not take his eyes off her. He stooped down to kiss her, but the moment their lips met, her eyes opened and she awoke. She smiled upon him, and he carried her out of the little tower room. Soon the king and queen awoke, and the whole court, and gazed at each other in wonder. The horses woke and shook themselves, and the dogs jumped and barked. The pigeons flew into the fields, the flies on the walls buzzed again. The fire in the kitchen blazed up, round went the spit. Soon the prince and Briar Rose were married. There was a great feast to celebrate, and they lived a long and happy life together.
You've just heard the story of Briar Rose. It was adapted by Jane Grandle, who also served as narrator. Briar Rose was played by Minear, Fish by Ellie Esdy, Queen by Briar Zachary, Bad Fairy by Kelsey Griffin, Twelfth Fairy and Old Lady by Jane Grandle, and Prince was played by Kyle Jensen. You've been listening to The Story Slot by Dyer Productions.